Sykes-Norp sighed, his 3 eye stalks drooping in resignation as he gazed out the viewport of the Galactic Council's orbiting station. Below, the serene purple surface of Lullaby Prime stretched as far as his compound eyes could see. It was beautiful, peaceful, and utterly boring. Just like every other day on this backwater planet, another thrilling day in paradise, he muttered to his colleague Blorp, who was busy organizing a stack of datapads. I swear, if I have to file one more report on the mating habits of the Lullaxian slug moths, I'm going to shoot myself out of the nearest airlock. Blorp's gelatinous form quivered with what passed for laughter among his species. Oh, come on, Zakes. It's not that bad. At least we're not stationed on one of those dreadful death worlds. Sykes-Norp's tentacles writhed in a gesture of disgust. I'd take a death world over this mind-numbing tedium any day. At least there'd be some excitement. Careful what you wish for, Blorp cautioned, his body rippling with amusement. You know what they say about Deathworlders. They're walking disasters wrapped in flesh suits. Please, Sykes-Norp scoffed, waving a tentacle dismissively. Those are just stories to scare hatchlings. I bet if a Deathworlder showed up right now, they'd be more fascinated by our floating crystal formations than anything else. Blorp oozed closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Did you hear about what happened on Gilatin V? They say a single Deathworlder tourist accidentally destabilized the planet's core by sneezing. Sykes-Norp rolled all 3 of his eye stalks. Now you're just making things up. Next you'll tell me they breathe fire and shoot lasers from their eyes. Well, actually. Blorp began, but was cut off by a piercing alarm that suddenly blared through the station. Red lights flashed, and the calm voice of the station's II filled the air. All personnel. Unidentified vessel approaching. Unknown origin. Prepare for possible first contact scenario. Sykes-Norp's eye stalks shot up in excitement. Finally, some action. The 2 aliens rushed to the command center, joining a gaggle of their multispecies colleagues. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a sleek, metallic ship unlike anything they'd ever seen. By the great void, whispered Commander Vax-Lorp, her scales shimmering with anxiety. It's a Deathworlder ship. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Deathworlders were the stuff of legend, terrifying creatures from high-gravity planets with extreme climates. Planets that made even the toughest Galactic Council species look like delicate flowers. Open a communication channel, ordered Vax-Lorp, her voice quavering slightly. The view screen crackled, and suddenly they were face to face with the Deathworlder. The alien creature had only 2 eyes, primitive, no tentacles, and was covered in some kind of colorful fabric. Its mouth opened, revealing a row of ominous white protrusions. Greetings, citizens of the galaxy. I'm Captain Madison Chen of the Earth vessel Lullaby. We come in peace and all that jazz. Mind if we pop down for a visit? We've been cooped up in this tin can for months and we're dying for some fresh air. Metaphorically speaking, of course, since the room erupted into chaos. Blorp fainted, his gelatinous body spreading across the floor like spilled pudding. Vax-Lorp's scales turned a sickly shade of green. I'm a Panwell, she stammered, completely unprepared for the Deathworlder's casual demeanor. Sykes-Norp, seizing his chance for excitement, stepped forward. Welcome, Captain Chen. We'd be delighted to host you and your crew. Please, allow me to be your guide during your stay on Lullaby Prime. Madison's face broke into a wide grin, causing several junior officers to cower behind their consoles. Fantastic. We'll be down in a jiffy. Oh, and fair warning, we've got a little one on board. Hope you don't mind, kids. The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in stunned silence. A young Deathworlder, Vax-Lorp whispered, her voice filled with dread. Sykes-Norp, what have you done? Sykes-Norp's tentacles wiggled with glee. Oh, come on. How bad could it be? Blorp, who had reconstituted himself, gurgled ominously. You just had to say it, didn't you? As the command center buzzed with frantic preparations, Sykes-Norp found himself the center of attention, and not in a good way. You, Commander Vax-Lorp hissed, her scales now a mottled mix of angry red and terrified green. You're responsible for this invasion. Zixnorp's eye stalks drooped. Invasion. But they said they come in peace. Peace, screeched Kazi, the station's security chief, his exoskeleton rattling with agitation. Did you not hear? They're bringing a youngling. Do you have any idea how destructive Deathworlder offspring can be? Well, no, Zixnorp admitted. But surely our advanced technology danced, Glorp interrupted, his gelatinous form still quivering from his earlier faint. Have you forgotten the incident on Squishopia? One Deathworlder child with a simple projectile launcher. They called it a water gun. Liquefied half a continent. Zixnorp's tentacles twisted in confusion. But that's just a story, right? Like the one about the Deathworlder who accidentally became Emperor of the Zieglan Empire by winning a belching contest. The room fell silent, and Zixnorp felt a sinking sensation in all 7 of his stomachs. That actually happened, Commander Vaxlorp said quietly. Emperor Burp the First still rules to this day. Oh, Zixnorp said weakly. Well then, I suppose we should prepare? Prepare? Kazik chittered hysterically. How does one prepare for a force of nature? We might as well try to negotiate with a supernova. Commander Vaxlorp took a deep breath, her scales settling into a more composed blue. Enough. What's done is done. Zixnorp, since you so eagerly volunteered to be their guide, you'll be in charge of the welcoming committee. Try not to get our planet destroyed, will you? Zixnorp saluted with 3 of his tentacles. You can count on me, Commander. I'll make sure these Deathworlders see the best Lalaxia has to offer. Why, by the time they leave, they'll be so relaxed they'll practically be Lalaxians themselves. As he scurried off to prepare, Zixnorp failed to notice the looks of abject horror exchanged by his colleagues. Blorp oozed over to Commander Vaxlorp and whispered, Should we begin evacuation procedures now, or wait until the first building explodes? Vaxlorp sighed, her scales fading to a resigned grey. Let's give Zixnorp a chance. Who knows? Maybe these Deathworlders will surprise us. Little did they know just how prophetic those words would prove to be. As it turned out, it could be very bad indeed. The Earthship landed in a field just outside the capital city, its engines kicking up a cloud of Lulaxia's famous soporific pollen. Zixnorp and a delegation of shaking officials stood ready to greet their visitors. The ship's ramp lowered with a hiss, and out strode Captain Madison Shen, followed by her crew. But it was the small figure holding her hand that drew everyone's attention. Everyone, I'd like you to meet my daughter, Luna, Madison said, beaming with pride. Say hello to the nice aliens, sweetie. Luna, a tiny Deathworlder with wild curls and eyes that seemed to sparkle with mischief, waved enthusiastically. Hi, funny-looking space people. Zixnorp felt a twinge of alarm. In all his years of xenobiology studies, he'd never encountered a creature that radiated such chaotic energy. Well, he said, forcing cheer into his voice, shall we begin the tour? What followed was a day that would go down in Lalaxian history as the Great Nap Catastrophe. It started innocently enough. The humans were fascinated by Lalaxia's purple flora and floating crystal formations. Luna in particular seemed determined to touch, smell, or taste everything in sight. Luna, honey, please don't put that in your mouth. Madison called out for the umpteenth time as her daughter attempted to sample a glowing fungus. But Moom, Luna whined. It looks like cotton candy. Zixnorp's translator glitched on the unfamiliar term, rendering it as woven sugar clouds. He made a mental note to update the linguistic database. As they entered the capital city, things took a turn for the bizarre. The humans' heavy footsteps on the delicate crystal pathways sent vibrations through the city's structures. Lulaxians, unaccustomed to such forceful movement, began to sway dizzily. Oops, said Madison, as a group of locals stumbled into each other like drunken dominoes. Guess we should have packed our soft shoes, huh? Zixnorp laughed nervously. Oh, don't worry about it. Our citizens could use a little excitement in their lives. No sooner had the words left his mouth, or rather, his speech tentacle, than a particularly enthusiastic step from one of the human crew members sent a shockwave through a nearby crystal tower. The structure swayed, chiming like an enormous bell. "Fascinating harmonic resonance," exclaimed Dr. Quark, the ship's scientist, pulling out a device and pointing it at the tower. "The crystalline structure seems to amplify and modulate sound waves in a most peculiar—" He was cut off by a loud crack. A large crystal broke free from the top of the tower and plummeted towards the ground. "Look out," Madison yelled, scooping up Luna and diving to the side. Sykes-Null, moving faster than he ever had in his life, extended his tentacles to their full length and caught the falling crystal mere inches from the ground. He stood there, quivering with exertion and relief. The massive gem balanced precariously on his tentacle. "Nice catch, Noodle Man," Luna cheered, clapping her hands. "Yes, very impressive," wheezed Sykes-Null, his eye stalks crossed with the effort of holding the crystal. "Could someone perhaps assist me?" As the humans rushed to help, a small crowd of Lullaxians gathered, murmuring in awe. Never before had they seen one of their kind move so quickly or display such strength. Madison said as they carefully lowered the crystal to the ground. "On Earth, we have a saying. You don't know what you're capable of until you're tested." Sykes-Null flexed his tentacles, feeling a newfound respect for his own abilities. Perhaps there's something to be learned from Deathworlders after all. But the real trouble began when they reached the central plaza. A large crowd had gathered to gawk at the Deathworlders, their eye stalks swiveling in fascination. Luna, overwhelmed by the attention, began to sniffle. "Oh no," Madison muttered, recognizing the signs of an impending meltdown. "Quick, does anyone have a pacifier? A stuffed animal, a small moon we could give her to play with?" The Lullaxians stared blankly, their universal translators struggling to keep up. Luna's sniffles turned to full-blown wails. The sound, to Lullaxian ears, was like 1,000 sonic bombs going off at once. Citizens clutched their auditory organs in pain. "It's okay, sweetie," Madison said soothingly, scooping Luna into her arms. "Mommy's got you. How about a lullaby to calm you down?" And then, to the horror of every Lullaxian present, Madison began to sing. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." The effect was instantaneous. Lullaxians dropped like flies, their bodies slumping to the ground in heaps. The song, combined with their planet's natural soporific atmosphere, was too much for their sensitive neurological systems. "How I wonder what's happening?" Madison's voice trailed off as she noticed the falling aliens. Sykes-Null, fighting the overwhelming urge to curl up and hibernate for a century, managed to gasp out, "Please, stop singing." But it was too late. As Lena calmed and began to hum along with her mother, the soporific waves spread through the city like wildfire. Lullaxians everywhere succumbed to the most powerful nap of their lives. In the Galactic Council station above, Blorp watched in disbelief as city after city went dark, its citizens falling into a deep slumber. "By the void," he muttered. "They've weaponized bedtime stories." Hours later, as the humans huddled in their ship and waited for the planet to wake up, Madison turned to her daughter with a mix of pride and exasperation. "Well, Luna," she said, "I think we've officially redefined the term diplomatic incident." Luna, blissfully unaware of the chaos she'd caused, simply giggled and asked, "Can we visit the funny noodle people again tomorrow?" Madison sighed, wondering how she was going to explain this one to Galactic Command. "Maybe we should stick to uninhabited planets for a while, kiddo." Dr. Quark, who had been analyzing data from the incident, cleared his throat. "Captain, I believe I've identified the cause of the planet-wide narcolepsy." "Let me guess," Madison said dryly. "My singing voice?" "Well, partially," Quark admitted, "but it's more complex than that. The Lullaxian's atmosphere contains high levels of a compound similar to melatonin. Your lullaby, combined with Luna's harmonization, created a resonance frequency that amplified the compound's effects exponentially." Madison blinked. "So, we basically turned the whole planet into one big white noise machine." "Precisely," Quark beamed. "It's quite remarkable, really. We could revolutionize the field of xenobiology with this discovery." "Great," Madison groaned. "I can see the headlines now. Human explorers discover new sedative, accidentally sedate entire civilization." Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, Zixnorp was the first to awaken from the great nap. He stretched his tentacles, feeling more refreshed than he had in cycles. Well, he mused, looking around at his still slumbering fellow Lullaxians. I suppose this is one way to solve our chronic insomnia problem. As consciousness slowly returned to the population, rumors and speculation ran wild. Some claimed it was a Deathworlder attack. Others insisted it was a sign from the cosmic entities. A few even suggested it was an elaborate prank by the notoriously unfunny Lullaxian Comedy Guild. Zixnorp found himself at the center of it all, fielding questions from groggy bureaucrats and confused citizens alike. No, Councillor Zex, the humans did not attempt to liquefy our brains with sound waves, he explained for the umpteenth time. It was simply a cultural misunderstanding. A lullaby is a form of auditory relaxation technique for their young. Tries and relaxation technique, sputtered Councillor Zex, his spiral-shaped eyes spinning in disbelief. It knocked out an entire planet. Zixnorp's tentacles wiggled in what he hoped was a soothing manner. Yes, well, they are Deathworlders. Everything they do tends to be a bit intense, and as the day wore on, the situation grew increasingly chaotic. Reports flooded in from across the planet. In the southern hemisphere, a group of Lullaxian scientists had fallen asleep while conducting anti-gravity experiments. Their lab was now floating serenely in the mesosphere. The great Lullaxian sloth migration, a centuries-old tradition where the planet's sloths moved at a glacial pace from one continent to another, had come to a complete standstill. Millions of sloths now snoozed in a line that stretched across an entire ocean. Perhaps most alarmingly, the planet's core, which required constant psychic maintenance from a team of dedicated telepaths, had been left unattended. Geologists warned of potential tectonic instability if the core wasn't soothed soon. Zixnorp felt his three hearts sinking. This was turning out to be far more excitement than he'd bargained for. Just then, a flustered aide rushed up, waving a datapad. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human ship." The view screen flickered to life, revealing Captain Madison Chen's apologetic face. "Hey there. How's everyone doing?" "Sleep well." Zixnorp forced his face tentacles into what he hoped was a diplomatic smile. "Captain Chen, yes, we're all quite refreshed. Thank you. Though we seem to be dealing with some unexpected consequences." Madison winced. "Yeah, about that. Look, we feel terrible about this whole mess. We'd like to help clean up if you'll let us." A Councillor Zex, who'd been oozing indignation nearby, suddenly perked up. "Clean up? How exactly do you propose to undo a planet-wide nap attack?" Madison's face took on a determined expression. "Well, we've been brainstorming and we think we've come up with a solution, but you might want to brace yourselves. It's a little unconventional." Zixnorp felt a mix of dread and excitement ripple through his tentacles. "At this point, Captain, I think we're open to unconventional solutions, and so Operation Wakey Wakey was born. The plan, as explained by Dr. Quark, was both brilliant and terrifying in its simplicity. If a lullaby could put the planet to sleep, then perhaps you want to do what? Councillor Zex shrieked, his body turning a vibrant shed of puce. "A planet-wide wake-up call." Dr. Quark repeated patiently. "We'll use your global communication network to broadcast a carefully calibrated mix of energizing sounds. Think of it as an auditory espresso shot for your entire civilization." Zixnorp, who had been hastily researching human beverages, felt his stomach churn at the thought. "And what exactly will this wake-up call entail?" Madison stepped forward, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Oh, just a little mix of rooster crows, alarm clocks, and death metal." The Lullaxian delegation stared blankly. "Trust me," Madison added with a wink. "It'll have you up and at 'em in no time." And so, with a mix of trepidation and desperate hope, the Lullaxians agreed to the plan. The next morning, what passed for morning on a planet where a significant portion of the population was still snoozing. Operation Wakey Wakey commenced, as the first notes of Wake Up by Rage Against the Machine blasted through every speaker, communicator, and telepathic amplifier on the planet. The reaction was immediate and spectacular. Lullaxians jolted awake en masse, their peaceful slumber shattered by an auditory assault, the likes of which their world had never known. The floating anti-gravity lab came crashing back to Earth, thankfully landing in a conveniently placed bouncy castle that the humans had thoughtfully inflated. The great sloth migration reversed direction, with millions of suddenly energized sloths racing back to their starting point at speeds previously thought impossible for their species. And deep beneath the planet's surface, the core telepaths snapped back to attention, their minds filled with visions of electric guitars and angry lyrics about systemic oppression. As the chaos unfolded, Zixnor found himself in the middle of it all, trying desperately to maintain some semblance of order. "No, Minister Floor. The sound is not an attack by our ancient enemies, the insomniacs of Nebula X-22, he shouted over the din. And please, put down that ceremonial sleep mask. I don't think hurling it at the sky will help." Meanwhile, Luna, who had been watching the proceedings from the safety of the human ship, tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mummy, the noodle people are dancing funny." Madison looked down at the planet's surface, where indeed thousands of Lullaxians were involuntarily bobbing and weaving to the aggressive beat. "Oh, honey," she said with a mixture of amusement and horror, "I don't think that's dancing. I think we've invented a new form of alien aerobics." As the last notes of the wake-up playlist faded away, ending, appropriately enough, with the final countdown by Europe, a stunned silence fell over the planet. Zixnor, his tentacles frazzled and his eye stalks drooping with exhaustion, turned to address the human delegation. "Well," he said, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice, "I suppose we should thank you for your assistance." Madison stepped forward, her face a mask of contrition. "We are so sorry about all of this. If there's anything we can do to make amends—" She was cut off by a sudden burst of applause. To everyone's surprise, the Lullaxians had begun cheering, their tentacles waving enthusiastically in the air. "That was amazing," cried one citizen, his eyes glowing with an uncharacteristic energy. "I haven't felt this awake in centuries. My chronic back pain is gone," shouted another, doing a little dance. "I think it was cured by something called a mosh pit." Even Councillor Zex, who had been so vehemently opposed to the human's presence, seemed transformed. "Captain Chen," he said, his spiral eyes spinning with excitement, "I must know. Do you have more of this death metal?" As the humans were swarmed by enthusiastic Lullaxians clamouring for more Earth music, Zixnor felt a tap on his lower tentacle. He looked down to see Luna smiling up at him. "Mr. Noodleman," she said sweetly, "can I braid your tentacles? Pretty please." And in that moment, as he looked at the hopeful face of this tiny Deathworlder who had inadvertently turned his world upside down, Zixnor realized something profound. The galaxy was a far stranger and more wonderful place than he had ever imagined. "You know what, little one?" he said, lowering his tentacles to her reach. "I think I'd like that very much." In the days that followed, as Lullaxia slowly adjusted to its new, slightly more energetic rhythm, the Galactic Council was thrown into an uproar. Emergency sessions were called. New protocols were drafted, and a certain human lullaby was officially classified as a weapon of mass unconsciousness. Zixnor, by much to his delight, found himself at the center of it all. As the official liaison to the humans, he was tasked with smoothing over interstellar relations and preventing future apocalypses. "You know," he said to Blorp one day, as they watched the human's ship depart for its next adventure, "I think I finally understand that old Terran saying." "Which one?" Blorp asked, still a bit groggy from his extended nap. Zixnor's eye stalks twinkled with amusement. "Be careful what you wish for." As the ship disappeared into the stars, carrying its cargo of chaotic Deathworlders and their reality-warping offspring, Zixnor couldn't help but feel a twinge of excitement. The galaxy had just gotten a whole lot more interesting, and somewhere, in the vast expanse of space, a little girl named Luna was already asking, "Where are we going next, Mommy?" The universe held its breath, wondering which unsuspecting planet would be the next to discover that when it came to humans, even the smallest packages could deliver the biggest surprises. After all, in a galaxy full of death worlds and eldritch horrors, Who would have thought that the most formidable weapon would be a simple lullaby? As for the Lolaxians, they learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't a planet's harsh environment or a species' physical prowess. Sometimes it's a mother's love, a child's laughter, and a song that can bridge the gap between stars. And if anyone ever asks why the entire population of Lolaxia Prime simultaneously decides to take a nap at the mere mention of twinkling stars, well, that's a story for another day. Just don't sing about it. Epilogue, 6 months after the Great Nap catastrophe. Lolaxia Prime had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The planet had become the hottest tourist destination in the galaxy, with beings from across the cosmos flocking to experience the legendary Lolaxian Lullaby spa treatment. Visitors would pay exorbitant amounts to be sung to sleep by specially trained Lolaxians, using a carefully modulated version of Madison's Lullaby, Zixnor. Now the Minister of Interstellar Cultural Exchange stood at the spaceport, watching as another group of excited tourists disembarked. "Welcome to Lolaxia Prime," he announced, his tentacles wiggling in the traditional greeting. "Where every day ends with a good night's sleep, and every morning starts with a bang, as if on cue, the opening riffs of Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses blasted through the spaceport speakers, causing several new arrivals to jump in surprise." Zixnor chuckled to himself. Life had certainly become more interesting since the humans' visit. The Lolaxians had embraced their new reputation as the galaxy's experts on sleep and wakefulness with surprising enthusiasm, and the planet's economy was booming with new industries springing up overnight. Lolaxian dream cafes, where patrons could sample beverages infused with the planet's natural soporific pollen, such as anti-gravity yoga studios, inspired by the accidental floating laboratory incident. And, most popular of all, the planet-wide music festival Snoozy Palooza, featuring the best of both Lolaxian ambient sounds and its most energetic genres. As Zixnor guided the new group of tourists towards their hotel, he overheard a snippet of conversation that made his eye stalks quiver with suppressed laughter. "I heard," whispered one tourist to another, "that if you listen closely on a quiet night, you can still hear the echo of that first lullaby in the crystal towers." Imorp smiled to himself. If only they knew the truths, that every night, as the planet settled down to sleep, a small holographic projection of Luna appeared in the capital's central plaza, singing her mother's lullaby. It had become a cherished tradition, a reminder of the day that had changed everything. As the sun set on another busy day on Lolaxia Prime, Zixnor looked up at the stars and wondered what other adventures awaited out there in the vast, unpredictable universe. Life would never be boring again, and somewhere, light years away, a little girl named Luna dreamed of noodle people and floating crystals, a smile on her face as she hummed a tune that had inadvertently reshaped a civilization. The galaxy, it seemed, would never be quite the same.